It is now 8:30. Good morning. Welcome to the WLBB Community Voice here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3, also streaming live online at newstalk1330.com. And this morning, we've brought in Joel Brock to handle the Facebook Live duties, and appreciate him being in this morning. Glad you guys get an opportunity to check in on my guest this morning. He's a country undertaker.
That's right.
And he's the District 68 State Representative, R-Villa Rica. His name is Jay Collins. We appreciate him coming on this morning.
Hey, thank you for having me, Colin.
Absolutely. We've gone through the local representatives and senators, talking a lot about the election bill, and I know you've talked about it for the last month as well. So maybe this will be the last time, at least until January or July 1st, when it's actually official, when it's signed into law, I guess. But even though no elections immediately, won't be any elections until fall. But we'll see how that goes.
Well, I don't think Republicans need to stop talking about the election bill and tell the truth about it. There's been so many untruths spoken about Senate Bill 202 that I think we're just now getting started.
Well, I'm going to pinpoint some specifics and give you a chance to talk about those in particular. I will just go through. I mean, I've pulled out some things just that I've seen have been spoken about in public or online, even national people talking about the state law. Voters will now have less time to request absentee ballots.
Absolutely. 6 months was what was in statute prior to Senate Bill 202. And what you had people that were requesting absentee ballots that forgot they had done that. I mean, 6 months. That's a long, long, long time. And that really cuts down on the efficiency of local boards to be able to do their job. So I thought that was a great move.
The ID requirements, I don't think there's a lot of people can really argue with the fact that perhaps you should have an ID to go vote. I don't see a rational argument against that. But I think the problem with that, people who are speaking out against it have it that it's happening right now, that it happened after this controversial election in which the Democrats won both of the big elections handedly. Right. That might be the bigger issue. I mean, do you even feel like you're defending the use of ID, using ID for voting now?
There was a bipartisan commission several years ago that identified the absentee process that we have as one of those areas that was up for some security breaches, because it was a subjective signature match and we needed to move to an objective identification number. So to me, that was a no-brainer. But the important thing to remember is we just came through the first global pandemic in a century. So we saw some strain on the election system. Regardless of who the winner was of the November election, we had to have some legislation. I mean, we had House Bill 316 that basically authorized the Secretary of State's office to purchase those new Dominion voting machines. So when you couple the fact that we had a new system that had never been used, you add that with the global pandemic, and you see the shift and change in the way that people voted. The system was never set up to handle the mass amount of absentee ballots that we had we were able to have in Georgia. So this language was just some cleanup language that needed to be done, that should have been done. And I wasn't one of those people that stood up and said, Trump had this election stolen from him. I felt like the machines worked very well. You had the electronic vote, you have the paper ballot. My concern has always been with the absentee process. Now you're going to have security paper for those absentee ballots. So I just don't understand how you can say that disenfranchises a certain group of people, that since voter ID has been implemented in Georgia, that group of folks have continued to vote more and more in each election.
Jay Collins, District 68 State Rep, our guest on this morning's Community Voice. You did mention the voting machines, Dominion voting machines. A lot of people had concerns about those machines, and there were theories put out there and stories told along those lines. There wasn't any regulation that would suggest there was any concern about those machines or the way they were purchased.
No, not that I'm aware of. In this new bill, it makes the testing of those machines more transparent, more open, more frequently. So one thing I really liked about the machine is you have the electronic vote and you have a paper ballot. So now you look at those risk-limited audits that are performed, and if something doesn't line up, those totals aren't there together, then you'll know something has happened, and we just didn't see that.
Prohibiting the sending of unsolicited absentee ballot applications.
It's probably one of the most, the best probably the best part of that bill, I would think. I think one of the most confusing aspects of the November election was the amount of third parties that were sending out, these requests for absentee ballots. And it was very confusing to people. A lot of people say, "Oh, I got 5 or 6 requests." Well, you probably got 5 or 6 from third parties. So it became very confusing to a lot of people, especially our older seniors.
Were people actually voting more than once because of that?
I don't believe so.
Mobile voting centers where you can vote are essentially banned.
That's another great thing. I mean, those are something that hadn't really popped up until the pandemic. And with all the early voting days that we have, why do you want to have mobile voting centers? To me, that just opens up for a lot of irregularities and exposes the system to an area that you can't really control.
This law came out, I believe it was separate from the from SO2. Elections officials can no longer accept third-party funding, and locally in Carroll County, they did accept from a group, which this was after the election. It was several months after the election. They actually approved the money. I don't know if they were able to. I don't know how it worked out when they actually got it, or if it just reimbursed them for things they did.
Well, the county board of commissioners can still accept those funds. We're not prohibiting a governing body from receiving funds. You just can't give that money directly to your board of elections.
Trying to think how it was phrased when it was, and you're probably going to remember it more because I'm sure you looked at that. Just trying to figure out how it was phrased when the county did approve that money, but it sounded like they approved it for the elections board, that the elections board would be reimbursed. They could still be reimbursed through that money if it goes through the county itself first, because I think the county here has to approve all those anyway, and always have.
That's what the legislation is intended to do. It makes sure that you're not giving the money directly to local boards of elections. You have to give it to the governing body.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like it would affect that previous thing, because there were a couple of commissioners who voted against it.
That's exactly right.
Jay Collins, District 68 State Rep, our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. Questions and comments, I encourage you to post them up on the News Talk 1330 Facebook page, and I'll try and take a look at those after the break. This one, probably less comfortable with. The Republican-controlled legislature, and they are the Republican-controlled legislature right now, has more control over the state election board. And I know if there was Democratic head of the legislature, it would be, Democrats would have the option to head up the election board and pick that nonpartisan person to lead that. What's your feeling on that? Why is that okay? I mean, I think we elect that SOS. I mean, Democrats and Republicans, do vote to elect that person.
To me, it was a response to the argument that I heard in 2018. Where you had a sitting Secretary of State that was running for governor, and that election was called into question. So you don't have the Secretary of State overseeing maybe an election where he is a candidate for the highest office in the state. So to remove the Secretary of State from the State Board of Elections, I thought that was a great idea because you have an executive member of the branch of government there. If you believe in the separation of powers, the judicial, executive, and legislative body, I think that was a great move. Because it puts someone from the legislative branch of government in that position who can respond to these consent orders. You had a Secretary of State who agreed to an agreement with a consent order, and the legislative body was never made aware of that until months and months down the road. So the legislation just really cleans up and separates some of the powers there of the branches of government.
That's the first time that I've heard somebody use that explanation for it, and now it makes more sense to me than the other ones that have been put out. I mean, somebody may have been saying it, but that's the first time I've heard that. Would Jeff Duncan, he said he's not going to seek re-election, but if he decided he was going to run for governor, would you vote to have him removed as the head at that point, head of the elections? Jeff Duncan.
Right.
I mean, if he, I'm sorry, if Raffensperger decided he was going to run for governor. Would you vote to have him removed at that point to oversee the election?
Well, right now as it stands, he's removed from that the State Board of Elections, so that really wouldn't be an issue at that point.
It's a permanent thing at that.
Right.
I got you. Okay. I thought it would be each individual situation. All right, Jay Collins, District 68 Rep, our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. Time right now is 8:40. We're going to take our first break and come back and continue our conversation. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System, Oak Mountain Academy on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3.
travel, get-togethers, Sunday morning worship. COVID-19 has almost put a stop to our way of life. Vaccination is our best shot at getting back to normal. The COVID-19 vaccine is based on more than a decade of research. Trials show it's safe and can provide up to 95% protection when you've received both doses. Tanner is committed to making the vaccine as widely available as possible, giving you a shot at getting back to life. Until then, keep wearing your mask, washing your hands, and avoid gatherings. Learn more and get updates at tanner.org/vaccine.
At Oak Mountain Academy, our academic excellence shines through innovation and a personalized educational experience. Our pre-K 3 through 12th grade environment offers a family-oriented atmosphere. We are an independent school with faith-based values and an academy honor code. Our academic standards prepare our students for college and beyond. I'm Patrick Duran, headmaster, inviting you to visit us on the mountain or at oakmountain.us. Come see how our warriors are creating legacies.
(8:41). Welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3, also streaming live online at newstalk1330.com, also on the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page this morning with our guest, District 68 State Rep Jake Collins. A couple more questions on elections reform. But I want to talk about redistricting a little bit later on, potential for redistricting and a couple of other things. But the runoff elections, should there be any, and there always seems to inevitably be, they will happen faster. I guess explain the rationale behind that, and could it cause it to be more chaotic for elections officials? Could that give them more trouble if they're having to rush and put those together when they had more time before?
No, I think that was something that needed to be done. You don't need to have elections just continue to go on, drag on for months. And so I think limiting that amount of time is the right thing to do. It seems to be that would be the best thing to do to limit that.
Will that limit spending, do you think, of politicians who are campaigning?
Absolutely not. It's been mind-blowing and astonishing to see the amount of money that's been poured into our state over the last 4 years.
Let's talk about the political, reaction to the new laws that were put in effect. I mean, Home Depot, Home Depot spoke out against it. I guess the Atlanta Falcons, a lot of big businesses speaking out against that, and there's been responses from the governor and MLB boycotted the All-Star game and the draft. What's your reaction to that?
I just think people aren't really looking at the bill and seeing exactly what it does, and I think that we probably hurt ourselves as a party because some of the talking points early on by individuals, not myself, was that we need to do away with no excuse absentee ballots and changing some things to maybe swinging the pendulum to the other side. I think what was done is just legislation that needed to be done to clean up, to make the process more fair and transparent and more uniform. That's the main thing. The way you vote in South Georgia needs to be the same way you vote in West Georgia, in East Georgia. I mean, so keeping voting uniform throughout the state, I think, is vitally important.
I think the argument there is that Atlanta's different than South Georgia and East Georgia. I mean, so really, can you do it the exact same way?
I think you can. I mean, you have the same amount of voting days. You have the same voting machines. I think the counties that have had poor election experience is the fact that I sat on the Governmental Affairs Committee, and we heard some testimony a couple of years ago about the election and some of the problems that we were having in some of the metro counties. And one of the things that shocked me was we had some testimony from one of the poll workers showed up to a precinct to vote, and they had to come in and get the equipment ready, and they were in a gym, and there were no cords to be able to plug the machines into the receptacles. I mean, just small stuff like that. And when you get a precinct that has that happen, that it gets backed up, it never catches back up, and it just creates chaos. So I mean, there's some things that can be done by each of these individual counties, just taking a little initiative and having the right people in the right place. Just to go get the $200 to be a poll worker, or that's one thing. But making sure the people that you have that are poll workers have the skill set necessary to perform the task, I think that's vitally important.
How will legislators determine if any kind of the reform put into place was successful? How do you decide? Okay, wow, well that worked there. I mean, a lot of people will say, okay, well, if Republicans win big elections in 2 years, well, then it worked. But how will you determine as a legislator if that was successful?
I think time will tell. I think if you turn on, and I think the guts of this bill, and when you boil right down, you get right down to it and boil it all out. I think that, when you turn on the TV on election night, and to be able to know the results of that election that evening, I mean, this is what this legislation is doing. We were the laughing stock of the nation because of the way our election process went out. What's outlined in this piece of legislation hopefully will make sure that come midnight, the night of the election, we will know who the winner is. It won't drag on for days.
Was there anything in any of the bills put forward, or anything approved, rather, anything approved into law that, I guess, what was left out? Was there anything that you felt like was left out of those bills that maybe should have been put in this time?
Well, Colin, I think that you have to look at this, any elections bills. Between 2002, I believe, and 2020, you had 59 elections bills that came through the General Assembly. So, elections bills are not something new to the General Assembly. A lot of people on the other side of the aisle and certain news outlets would make you feel that election legislation was just a response to the previous election, and that's furthest from the truth. But as you continue to have elections and things, voter patterns change, it's necessary to reevaluate your elections legislation and to tweak it. I mean, you don't purchase a car and not maintain it. The same thing goes with elections. You have to constantly fine-tune that to make sure that you're having the most efficient and effective way for the populace to cast their vote.
All right. How about you in particular, as far as any bills that you were a big part of this year? That maybe some that were approved, and maybe some that are hanging out there and could be brought back in the next session. What were some that were important to you?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to sign on to a bill, my good friend Houston Gaines, HB 286, to prohibit the defunding of the police. As you can see today, I'm wearing my thin blue line tie. I'm a chairman of the Public Safety Homeland Security Committee in the House. Support our law enforcement officers. At a time when you have the cry for police reform, why in the world would you want to defund police departments? We need to make sure and have them have the best training possible, have accessible the best training possible. So if you want to support police reform, why in the world would you want to defund the police? And this piece of legislation just says that local governments, unless they have some massive revenue reduction, cannot defund their police departments.
And defund is completely removing the money.
Well, just cutting their budget. I mean, if you take away the money, you take away their budget, you take away their ability to do their job. Mm-hmm. And local government, that's one of the main needs of local government, is to maintain civil peace. And if you take away from that, I think you really hurt the public safety overall.
You want to tell us about Officer Gordy, what you know the latest? I mean, there was an event yesterday I know that you took part in, and he was up there. He's up and about. And
he was. I asked him how he was doing. He said he walked in on his own, and I spoke with him again last night, and just very fortunate that all our officers look like are going to come through that.
Absolutely. How about any other legislation that you maybe have started and it's maybe had first reading, or it's in committee or something that could be brought up in the next year before the actual 2-year session ends?
Well, there was another piece of legislation that I was able to help out with, and I believe it was House Bill 591. Representative Don Hogan, Chairman Don Hogan, my good friend from down around St. Simons, he sponsored that piece of legislation, and I signed on with him. But it basically allows counselors, marriage therapists to actually have folks looked at and do the 1013s where you're committed involuntarily to be looked at psychologically. So I think that was a very important piece of legislation. Mental health is a huge issue here in our state and around the nation. So being able for those marriage therapists under certain situations to jump in and help someone, I think that's a very good piece of legislation. It's supposed to be going to the governor's desk.
Oh, it's already been signed then?
Well, it's going to the governor's desk.
But you guys have approved it, so it's
yes,
I got you.
Passed the Senate and the House.
Jay Collins, District 68 State Rep. our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. I'm going to come back with about 10 minutes left in the show. If you heard our initial conversation, our first two segments, and anything you want to touch on or get a better explanation on, I encourage you to post it to the News Talk 1330 Facebook page, and I'll take a look at it during this break. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3.
Travel, get-togethers, Sunday morning worship. COVID-19 has almost put a stop to our way of life. Vaccination is our best shot at getting back to normal. The COVID-19 vaccine is based on more than a decade of research. Trials show it's safe and can provide up to 95% protection when you've received both doses. Tanner is committed to making the vaccine as widely available as possible, giving you a shot at getting back to life. Until then, keep wearing your mask, washing your hands, and avoid gatherings. Learn more and get updates at tanner.org/vaccine.
As a graduate of Oak Mountain Academy, I've found that my experience on the mountain prepared me beyond all expectations. As a junior at Auburn University, I approached my studies with great confidence thanks to what I learned at OMA. When I think back on my time on the mountain, I think of my teachers. Their genuine love and concern for me as a student was always evident, and now, as an adult, I still foster those relationships. I'm Carly Robinson, an Oak Mountain Academy alum. Visit oakmountain.us to see how you can offer your child an amazing opportunity to be a warrior.
.851. Welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3, streaming live online at newstalk1330.com. And this morning we are on the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page. I'm Colin Worthington. You can see my guest, District 68 State Rep Jay Collins, Republican out of Villa Rica. How long have you been? Six years now? Is this your fifth?
This is my fifth year.
Fifth year. And I guess what's your intent? Are you enjoying it, or is this is it worth going to Atlanta 40 days at the first part of the year?
I do enjoy it. It's very difficult for someone like me who has still active in my family business and my business. Have a little girl that's 9, fixing to be 10. So January, February, March, that's really hard. And I tell you, over the last several years, I've developed a respect for anybody who does this any length of time. I think Judge Hightower, former Representative Hightower, would tell you the same thing. It's a sacrifice to go over and do that and walk away from a lot of things for 40 days, but not just 40 days. It really spread out over 3 months. And I'm thankful that the good folks of House District 68 have elected me, and hope to seek re-election again. A lot of that's going to depend on redistricting. That's coming up this fall.
And do want to talk about that. What do you see? I mean, I imagine you guys have to have at least a head start, and maybe you have some input on what you would hope. I mean, to see what do you see happening? I think we were talking before the show. Maybe 4,000 new people in the last 10 years in Villa Rica alone.
In Villa Rica City, yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what the true numbers are coming out. I've got my own forecast, and I want to see how close I am to that.
Well, share with us. Share your forecast.
But I know the district has grown. One of the things I think is important when you talk about redistricting is making sure that you keep, groups of people together. And when I say that, I mean, the trade area, with Carroll County, making sure that you don't have people that are Carroll County or going over to too far up into Paulding County and going too far down into Heard County. I think these big, huge districts are geographically. I don't think that serves anybody well.
Mm-hmm. It is frustrating to see that when certain things are separated like that. Do you believe that maybe senior legislators have some sort of pull as to say, well, you know what, I'd like to have that group of people. I'd like to have that demographic. So let me kind of work it into my district.
Well, I think the process has been in place, and I mean, it is what it is. The majority party tends to have a little more control. That's the way it was back during the days of the Democrats ruling the House. And you had these districts that ran from Atlanta all the way to Savannah. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
A couple of posts on our Facebook page. MWC Bolt, well articulated, comes across very knowledgeable and informed. This guy, Tyler Paul Smith, this guy out of Haralson County. Jay Collins, great Georgian, great American.
Let me tell you something. Tyler Paul Smith has a great future in politics. He is a brilliant young lawyer, knows how to talk to folks, very intellectual. And I look forward to seeing where politics is going to take him, because he's a great guy.
Leslie Smith McPherson says, thanks for getting Officer Gordy home in style. I guess you were leading the limousine.
Well,
were you driving the limousine?
I'm glad he was able to be home.
There you go. Leslie also says, do you believe Speaker Ralston will let the gun bill, HB 218, come to the floor for a vote next year, unlike this year?
There are a lot of folks like me who are pro-Second Amendment, and I think that it may be time to move some gun legislation. But at the same time, we've got to hear from the other side as well.
What is the bill, 218?
Well, it's a constitutional carry bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jay Collins, District 68, representative, our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. What do you feel about so-called vaccine passports? I know federally they've kind of said we're not going to encourage that or suggest that or push that in any way, but I don't know how they feel on a state level to do that, or even the private district. I mean, are they going to, are private entities going to encourage something like that?
I think you're probably going to say, I was watching a segment on cable television last night, and they were talking about how these giant corporations are, got all your data, and they're kind of putting together their own database of those folks who have been vaccinated. So, that's a concern there. I don't think it's necessary.
All right, we got about 3 minutes left in the show. What, it's always an easy question. What can we look for out of legislators next year? What are going to be the biggest issues to focus on? And perhaps you've got some committees lined up this year and some studies to be done that will be ahead of that.
Well, as chairman of the House Public Safety Committee, I was called upon by the Speaker to hold hearings this summer to deal with look into the spike in crime that we've seen in Atlanta. And, that's something I'm looking forward to. We Sinai died back at the end of March, and April's just been kind of a chance to, let folks catch up back home with what they're doing, their personal lives, their businesses. So I noticed just this week, I think that the City of Atlanta and Mayor Bottoms have come out with an initiative to curb some of the street racing and deal with some of the crime that's been occurred. And I think she recognizes that something needs to be done. So given that, we want to take a little time and see how that shakes out. But I think the conversation needs to be had and talk about some things on the table, because at the end of the day, you talk about an elections bill and companies boycotting Georgia, but I mean, if you continue to see the growth in crime and violence in Atlanta, what's that going to do to your economy in Atlanta? Mm-hmm. I mean, people won't want to go shop and dine and go to theater and go to ball games if you continue to see the violent crimes that are occurring inside the perimeter.
And in that discussion, I guess the suggestion is potentially Georgia State Patrol could become part of their, I mean, I don't know if their jurisdiction, but they would definitely help a lot out more with the Atlanta police. That's
exactly right. So we'll just see where the conversation goes. And, I don't want to have a conversation that's, one-sided. I think it needs to be had to listen and be diplomatic about it. At the end of the day, Atlanta is the capital city in Georgia and really the hub of a lot of economic prosperity. And we've got the largest airport in the nation. You've got interstates. I mean, so it's vitally important that Atlanta stays healthy. And so from what I can see, I want to have that conversation and listen, and maybe, be able to provide some guidance and look at some things that maybe they hadn't thought about.
Constituents wanting to contact Jay Collins, what's that information?
You can call my Capitol office there. I have a website, Representative Jay Collins. I have a Facebook page. Of course, have an office at my funeral home here in the district, always accessible. 770-295-8143 is my cell number. Again, that's 770-295-8143. Always available. Want to listen. And if you're a Democrat, I represent you, and I want to represent you. Call me.
Thank you, sir.
If you're a Republican, I want to represent you. I do represent you. Call me.
Appreciate you being on the show this morning. Time right now is 8:59. Stay tuned for national news. Tomorrow on the Community Voice, we're bringing out a good show for a Friday, going out on a rock and roll note. So if you tune in for that program at 8:30, News Talk 1330 FM 106.3.